Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. I'm the author of the 10 UN Academy series, and this is English Nerd. So today I wanted to talk about character arcs. This is going to be Character Arc 101. I've had a few requests for a video about plot, creating plot. The reason that I haven't really done that before is that I wasn't quite sure how to tackle it. There are lots of different ways that you can talk about plot. So it's likely that I'll do more than one video about it. You might think, but this is character arcs, this isn't plot. True, but really plot is character. Whether you're talking about something that's character driven, like, Pride and Prejudice or Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets of the universe, or something plot driven, like Hobbes and Shaw or something like that, it's all character. It's characters reacting to their environment, and it's the characters that make you have any stakes in what's happening. So let's talk about character arcs. Plot is not just stuff that happens, it's stuff that is meaningful that happens, and that meaning, that significance comes with change. If everything stays exactly the same, you don't have a story, you don't have plot, you just have stuff happening. So there are different ways that characters can change either the things around them or, more likely, within themselves. There are three main character arcs. So thanks for bearing with me with that introduction, but it's important to get this stuff. Three main character arcs. There's the positive character arc, which is far and away the most popular. There's a flat character arc, which is kind of rare, but we have some big name examples, and I'll give you examples of all of these. And then there's a negative character arc, which we don't see a lot, but there are some significant examples of what that means. So let's start with a positive character arc. Basically, what you have with both positive and negative character arc stories, where people change for the better or when they change for the worse, is that you have a character who starts out believing some lie or having some great fear, which is kind of another way of just a certain type of lie, right? They might believe that material goods are more important than human lives. They might believe that they can never truly be safe. They might believe that they're inherently unlovable. There might be, a huge host of different kinds of lies, but there's a lie that the person believes. And what the external action does of the story, so the arguments with parents or the big war or whatever it is that it confronts that lie. And what happens within the story is really the character acting out of the beliefs that they have. So, for example, you have somebody who believes that they'll never be safe, and then there's some natural disaster or something that just reinforces that lie. Then somebody comes along and starts to give them a feeling of safety, takes care of them, and over the course of this story, those fears, that lie starts to kind of fall away and is overcome by the end of the story. So what you have is a positive character arc there. They confront that lie or that fear, and then at the end they grow past it and they're able to overcome that. So let me give you some examples of positive character arcs from a variety of different sources. So I'll start with classics. Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 1. The main character, who's actually Henry IV's son, Hal, has a positive character arc. He starts out as this kind of dissolute prince who is not worthy of the name and fears that he might not be worthy of the name, and then by the end of the story, through his interactions with the kind of low-life people and then threats to his family, he ends up rising up and becoming the king that he could be. So that's positive character arc. The movie, Secret Life of Walter Mitty, not so much the short story that it's based on. That one it's just a short story that doesn't have too much of an arc to it, but the movie definitely has a positive arc. You have a very fearful person at the beginning who feels like he can't change his life, and at the end he finds that he can. You have this in children's stories like Kermit the Hermit. If you haven't read Bill Pete, you're just totally missing out. Bill Pete is the best. So Kermit the Hermit is alone and thinks that he can only find comfort in gathering these things, but then by the end he overcomes all of his selfishness and his fear and becomes more compassionate. Oh, I'm gonna keep going. You have Pride, which is a Pride and Prejudice remix. So this is true of both the original Pride and Prejudice and this awesome retelling. There's a positive arc. The characters don't necessarily have to start out being terrible to overcome something. They just need to change for the better, get rid of their pride or their prejudice, as the case may be. And then one of my favorite examples is Cinder. Throughout the course of the series, the 4 books of the Lunar Chronicles, Cinder and some of the other characters have positive arcs, starting out thinking that they don't have what it takes and finding out through kind of forced experience that they do, which is awesome. So a lot of people like positive character arcs just because, of course, we want to see people overcome and change for the better because we want to overcome and change for the better. But that's not the only kind of arc. Sometimes the things that happen around a character don't put them into that furnace from which they arise better off. Sometimes the things that happen around a character make them worse, just reinforce that lie, and they get deeper entrenched into it. So I'll leave the flat arc for last. I'm going to go to a negative arc now. It took me a little bit longer to come up with examples for a negative character arc, but they definitely do exist. You have the picture of Dorian Gray, for example, and Dorian Gray at the beginning of the story believes that youth and beauty are more important than goodness, and so he sells his soul to remain beautiful and youthful forever, while the picture of him, the portrait picture of Dorian Gray, is becoming more disgusting with every bad action that he does, because he has no soul. The soul has gone into the picture, and anyway, you get the idea. So Dorian Gray, his belief is reinforced when he just becomes more and more paranoid about anybody seeing the corruption in the picture, and he does worse and worse things to cover it up. And it's a slow descent into becoming worse and worse based on that initial lie. So you have that with picture of Dorian Gray. 1984 is another classic example of a negative character arc. The setup makes it seem like there's going to be a positive character arc. The belief is that nothing can be done to overcome the party, that Winston Smith, the main character, has no agency in his own life, and it looks like he might be able to overcome that belief, but ultimately it is a negative arc, and those lies, those fears are reinforced and made worse. William Shakespeare's Othello. So I know this is a lot of classics, but classics tend to have more negative character arcs than modern books that I was looking at. So Othello is another one. The main character, Othello, starts out fairly trusting, but he has this fear that people will leave him, will cheat on him, and that fear is just played upon so much that he gives into that lie in like the worst possible way. And then a movie would be Revenge of the Sith, episode 3. You have Anakin, who believes that he has to do these evil things to become powerful enough to help the ones that he loves, and so he becomes worse and worse as the story goes on. So that's not super common, just because we don't generally enjoy seeing people get worse and worse and not finding that redemption or that chance to overcome. But there are definitely reasons why you might want to do a a negative arc. So what is a flat arc? You might be wondering, like, well, you change for the better, you change for the worse. What's the other option? The other option is that the character, him or herself, doesn't change over the course of the story, but they change the world around them. There still has to be change, right? But instead of having the primary change be internal, and often external at the same time, a flat character arc means that pretty much all of the action is going to be external because the character doesn't change. They just influence the world around them, often for the better. So an example of that would be the original Sherlock Holmes stories. Not so much Sherlock, the BBC version, because that's an origin story. You find Sherlock becoming more compassionate. That's more of a positive character arc. But in the original mysteries, you have a more mature Sherlock, and he is not really changing at all. He just is who he is, and he's influencing the world around him. Another example would be James Bond, or characters that are kind of like that. Now, in Casino Royale, for instance, you have a character arc. He does change over the course of that story, but in most of the James Bond movies, it's just him influencing everything around himself without actually having any sort of internal transformation. Or if you want to go with a softer kind of version, Paddington is another example of a flat arc. Paddington is just delightful and caring, and he influences the people around him for the better. So that's all external change happening around a character that is kind of a force of nature in his or her environment. So those are the three main types of character arcs that you can encounter. Again, the most popular one is going to be positive character arcs, but this is a great way to think about your story if you're in the middle of writing one or if you're planning one. Everything that happens should influence the change that is going to happen in the story. Again, you don't have a lot of flat arcs, so let's just talk about positive arcs, for instance. Everything that happens should have some bearing on the change that is going to happen with the character. Now, none of these positive or negative character arcs need to be perfect graphs. You know, somebody doesn't just get better and better and better and better. There are going to be setbacks, there are going to be failures, there are going to be more of a jagged line up or down. But ultimately, all of that is going to lead to overcoming that flaw, or it's going to reinforce it and solidify that within the character. So I hope that this was helpful. If you have any questions, put those down below. I'd love to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe for more English nerdy goodness. All right, I will see you next Monday.